Good morning to all. Welcome to our webinar, Transition to SaaS, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Given that SaaS has already crossed the hype and is becoming mainstream, many software vendors are planning on having or already having a SaaS strategy in their product roadmap, and it's becoming very essential for them to have because of the competition, because of the opportunities, because there are newer markets that they can target, and so on. So keeping that in mind, Aspire and Israel SaaS Center, we have organized this webinar, and we hope to make this webinar very useful for you and give you a lot of information both from the business and the technical perspective on how to go about preparing yourself and taking into consideration the various factors that are involved in building a SaaS solution or marketing a SaaS solution for your products. So our speakers today, Dani Shomron, he's the founder of Israel SaaS Center, and Janaki Jayachandran, who is the head of on-demand services at Aspire Systems, are the speakers today. Dani will speak from the business perspective, talk about both the Israel market, since we are specifically talking to the Israel and the European market. Dani will be speaking the market potential and the current scenario in those markets. And Janaki will talk about the technical preparations that are needed in building a SaaS solution. So our first speaker, Dani, he is a recognized thought leader. He has a lot of experience in SaaS and specifically in the ISV market. He has held several vice president positions for different software vendors and also SaaS startups. He's co-authored the book CIO Perspectives and contributed to the chapter on SaaS. He has been a presenter and panel moderator in several conferences and forums, and specifically the IGT World Summit of Cloud Computing. So before I move on to, before I hand over the microphone to the speakers, we wanted to quickly take a couple of polls just to understand, your current understanding on SaaS and how welcoming or your knowledge on SaaS, just so that we are able to deliver the webinar suitable for you. So first question, I would like you to take a few seconds to quickly key in your answer. So our first question is your intention about this webinar, or what is the purpose? Is it to learn more about SaaS, or to know about the model that can help you? Or if you're already considering SaaS, then you would like to understand the challenges, or if you are in the transition already, then would you like to know more about it? So these are some of the options that you have, so you can quickly respond to it. We already have a lot of responses coming in. Thank you. We appreciate your response. Okay. So I would quickly, so we've almost 84% of the audience responded, so thanks a lot. Now I'll close the poll and go back to, actually we have about 35% of the audience wanting to know more about SaaS, and 27% who are considering SaaS, and 23% who are in transition, and about 15% who want to know about the SaaS model that can help them. So that's the response. Now I will go ahead and hand over the control to Dani. Oh yeah, the second question, second poll. So give me 1 second while I also launch the second poll. Right. So we would like to know from your perspective on how you would rate your knowledge on SaaS. You consider yourself an expert, or do you have experience with SaaS? You understand the concepts, you're not sure what SaaS stands for. Okay, again we have responses coming in. Wonderful. So what, almost, I mean, we still have responses coming in, but so far almost over 70% of the audience understand the concepts. That's very good to know. Okay, now it's come down slightly. Great, so I'm going to close the poll. Thanks again for your response. So the results are that unfortunately or fortunately, none of you consider yourself as an expert, which means we have a lot of work to do, and we will make sure that this webinar becomes very useful to you. And so the concepts, 69%, experience with SaaS about 23%, and good that the last one we have only 8%. I'm not sure what SaaS stands for, which is good to know. So yeah, I'm going to again hide this poll and give over the control to Dani. Should take few seconds. Right, Dani, you should have the control now.
Thank you. I'm still waiting. Okay. Thank you, Kanchana. Good morning, all. As you can see, the title got a facelift. My chief marketing officer told me that the message was too negative, that we might scare people away. So today, politically correctness plays the game, and we're not supposed to say ugly anymore, but it's interesting. But the point is that SaaS is good, and if you remember from the movie, the good guy won in the end. But we must keep in mind that there are challenges, and I would like to talk them as well as talk about the methodology and the way to make it successful. So keep in mind, SaaS is good, but there's some ugly details. I'm sorry, there's some interesting details on the way that we must be made aware of, and we will talk about how to successfully transition to SaaS. When I first got involved with SaaS, it was over 10 years ago. It wasn't even called SaaS back then. I was acting as an evangelist. Very few people knew about it, and I had to stand in the market square and tell people that SaaS is good and SaaS is near. This disruptive technology is something you should look at. And I'm talking about the US market. Back then, an ISV, a software vendor, was looking at the questions of if, and then when and how, if I should transition to SaaS, and if so, when should I do it, and then only then get into the details of the how. Today, at least when looking from the U.S. market, there's no more question of if, and there's hardly a question of when, because the answer to that is yesterday. Now people are dealing with how to do it right. So I would say that from the U.S. perspective, at least, I should change the sign to SaaS is here, not SaaS is near. But let's look, this is the first webinar dedicated to the Israeli market on this subject. I understand that there are also viewers from the European community, and I welcome them with pleasure. But I'm keeping in mind that the Israeli market is a few years behind the U.S. market in regards to software as a service, and therefore I will dedicate more time to discussing what SaaS is, how it fits in the cloud stack, and the benefits of the model, why adopt, look at it from a provider's point of view and a consumer's point of view. Then I will discuss the challenges and what it means to the organization, to the vendor organization, to switch to the SaaS model. And finally, we'll discuss how to do it right. So there isn't too much time, and I'll go right into this. So first of all, everybody is talking about cloud these days. It's the hottest word on the market. So let's look just where SaaS fits into this model. There are three stacks in the cloud structure. The bottom stack deals with hardware, network, and storage. That's called infrastructure as a service. The leading company there was Amazon Web Services. I think most people are familiar with that. You have a lot of players in the market like Rackspace, GoGrid. All the big players are moving into that. In Israel, you have the pioneer of infrastructure as a service, which is CCC. So from the IT's perspective, you don't have to deal with hardware anymore. You can go outside and get resources for your hardware. But everything else beyond that is your job. You have to use those servers, soft and storage as if you would use it in-house. The next level is the platform as a service, so it deals with the framework. Again, one of the first players in this market was Salesforce. They came up with Force.com. These are platforms that you develop on the web, which means not only don't you have to deal with the hardware, but you don't have to deal with the development environment and the ecosystem as well. You just log on and start developing your application on the cloud. You have players such as Google Apps Engine and Windows Azure, which is a recent player in this market. And again, you as an IT department use those environments to develop your own application on top of that. Finally, we have the application layer, which is what we'll be concentrating on today, which is the software as a service. And there you don't have to deal with the hardware, you don't have to deal with the development. All you do is log into your application and start using it. All you need is a web browser and a login. And of course the famous player in this market is Salesforce, but a lot of people don't realize that they've been using SaaS services for many years. They just didn't call it that. One of the major players was WebEx. Everybody was using WebEx back 12 and 13 years ago, but nobody was thinking of calling it SaaS. In any case, a few points to remember. When we're talking about cloud, we're not only talking about infrastructure as a service, we're talking about the three layers. Another point to remember that infrastructure as a service has been around for 3.5 years. Software as a service has been around for over 10 years. It's a rather mature platform and mature offering. And the idea that it came along to bridge the gap between the small businesses and the enterprise business, whereas a lot of the software was not available to the small and medium businesses because of the price and because of the complexity and because of the high level staff you had to keep on board in order to run it. And software as a service came in to give the exact or very similar application capabilities to the smaller companies who couldn't afford to maintain large complex pieces of software. And finally, SaaS has become mainstream. It was a disruptive technology, but if we're looking at the US market today, it has become mainstream, and CIOs who up to about 2 years ago were afraid of SaaS, they didn't know what to do with it, and the SaaS became an IT avoiding strategy. It has suddenly become something that the CIO is embracing. They're using SaaS as a strategic strength for the IT department instead of seeing it as a threat. Let's look at what's happening with SaaS across mainly the US market, but also global markets. I don't want to go through the various components here, the various points, but you can look at this in general. The adoption rates are pretty amazing. We're talking about very high numbers across the US market and the global market, very fast growth rates, more than double than the growth rates of the enterprise software. And if you're looking at one of the most conservative organizations in the world, which is the US government, the US government launched about a year ago apps.gov, which is a SaaS marketplace for all US government agencies and their providers. So if the US government is going there, that means that something real is happening. And finally, I can quote Vivek Kundra, who is the Obama's CIO, and he's saying, "I'm all about the cloud computing notion. I look at my lifestyle and I want access to information wherever I am." And then he goes on to say, "I am killing projects that don't investigate SaaS first." So if that isn't a message, then there you go. So finally, a few definitions. First of all, SaaS has been called different names over the past decade, such as utility computing, on-demand, hosted, managed services. Back in the beginning of the century, it was called ASP, application service providers. Today it's considered a three-letter bad word, and cloud application services. There are differences between the various names. I won't go into them right now, but keep in mind that basically we're talking about services that are on demand, that are somewhere out there on the cloud. So let's look. There are three principles. The first principle is that the software is owned and operated by the software provider, which means that you as a consumer, you don't buy the software and you don't install it and you don't maintain it. The second point is that it's available over the cloud. Through all you need is a web browser and log in, and you can start using the application. In general, there's nothing between you and that. You do not have to be, or what's called anytime, anywhere. You can access the software anywhere around the world. If you have a web browser, it could be a smartphone, use it on your mobile. Finally, the software is not licensed out. You do not buy the software. It's subscription-based. There are various kinds of models, but the idea is that it's flexible pricing. The pricing can be on a monthly basis. It can be per usage, but the idea is it can basically grow and shrink throughout time, and you're not committed in advance to what you're going to be buying. Let's look at the benefits from a vendor's perspective. First of all, you have access to a large part of the market that if you're selling enterprise software, your software is either too expensive or too complex, it takes too much maintenance, so you never looked at anything below the tip of the iceberg where you were selling out to a large enterprise. Today you can tap into a very large market going down the food chain. The sales cycles are much shorter. When we're talking about quarters, sometimes you're talking about sales cycles of 12 to 18 months in the traditional traditional enterprise market. Today we're looking at on one edge, it could be a matter of 5 minutes to get somebody to sign up to your software, but it could be measured typically in weeks, not in months and not in quarters. Much simpler development. Keep in mind that you have a single platform out there. You don't have to support various kinds of databases, operating systems, application servers, and so on. You have a single platform. On the pure view of it, there's a single copy of your software running in the world. You don't have thousands of customers with different copies and different configuration. So the development is a lot simpler, and obviously the testing and problem resolution is much simpler as well, because again, you have a single program, single copy running out there. Recurring revenue, you can be a lot more predictable. Every month you know how many customers you already have as a minimum revenue coming in. Reduced implementation costs. Again, there's no installation on the customer side, no upgrades. You can get immediate feedback. Keep in mind when you bring out a new version, within 10 minutes you may have 1,000 users on your software. If you have a bug in there, you will know that immediately. You will know which parts of the software are being used, because if you come out with a new feature and 6 months down the line you have some customers starting to install and run your software, you have no idea if that feature is being used or not. Here, the next day you can already tell if that feature is being used. You can tell how your software is being used. And of course, a very important part is that you have domain level knowledge, because you're looking at all the users of that domain, and you can have a lot of value beyond your software of being an expert in your area. If we look at the consumer's perspective, first of all, costs. Again, I won't go into, this is a long discussion, but the main thing is that you're paying on a monthly basis. It's operational expenses and not capital expensive. Time to value. You can get the software up and running usually from one edge. It may be as soon as you sign in, you can start using it. In other cases, typical cases, it may be days, it may be weeks. But we're not talking about quarters or years to get the software to run. For the same reason, you have a managed risk of the software deployment, because again, you can start using it with a few test users. You don't have to commit up front for $500,000 and 6 months down the line to see if you can use the software. You can start using it from today. Most companies offer 1 month of a free trial, so you can get a few users and see if they like it. If it makes sense, you can start growing your user base on it. And if you decide that you don't want to use the software, the biggest risk you may have risked is a few $100s or perhaps a few $1,000s, and that was it. Anytime, anywhere, we already mentioned that. Continuous improvement, this means that you log off one evening with version 6.2. The next morning you log on, you have version 6.3 with a few bug fixes, a new feature. You don't have to deal with the upgrade nightmare that some companies skip full version because they're so scared of the upgrade. Here it's done in small steps. You don't have to deal with it. Basically, you start using the application and benefiting from it, generating business value from the application, and you as an IT, you can focus on the business and not on keeping the lights on. You can shift from strategy to firefighting. One more thing about the consumer market is we're looking at today's generation, the digital natives, the kids that grew up, consumization of IT. Today, all the software and the greatest technology comes first through the consumers markets, then it moves into the corporate, where it used to be first it was in the military, then it was in the corporate, then many years later the consumers got it. Today it's totally the other way around. Today's employees are next year's CIOs. These are kids that grew up on Google, Facebook, and Twitter. they have on their smartphone more applications than your whole IT department has. And if you're talking to them that, yes, 6 months from now we'll get the application up and running, hopefully, it's going to cost us $250,000 or $1.5 million, and you can only access it through work or using a VPN, these guys are going to say, come on, you got to be kidding me. I'm going to work somewhere else where it makes more sense. So taking that in mind, we're looking at the company, the software vendor that's convinced that, yes, they want to move into the ISV, into the SaaS model. You have to take in mind that it's a paradigm shift. It's not just another delivery mechanism. The company has to shift its focus from selling a product to selling a service. Now, this change is so profound that even a lot of SaaS companies don't get the enormity of the change, because most of them were selling software as a regular product to the enterprise just a year ago in the company that they worked for before. So they don't even themselves get how much this will affect every silo in the organization. It introduces new functions and entities that the vendor, the software vendor, is not used to. And keep in mind, success is not guaranteed. Sadly, there are a lot of companies out there that failed in their effort. Now, I have a whole presentation about the SaaS organization and how it affects every silo in the organization. For lack of time, we'll just look at quickly through a few groups within the organization, how it will affect them. First of all, the engineering group, you have to modify, sometimes rewrite the whole architecture from scratch. You may need to bring new talent, or you have to train your existing engineers for new software technologies and platforms. As we mentioned before, the issue of a simpler development, it's a single platform. You have to support a lot of areas in the service operations, systems that are usually not even considered in a regular software vendor. You have to support scalability and high availability. Most SaaS companies move into release cycles of 2 to 4 weeks, and not once a year or twice a year of a release, which means you may have to move into a new agile extreme programming of your software development, which is another pretty major change inside your engineering group. And you have to keep in mind that engineers interact a lot more closely with the end users, because the end users will be impacted immediately by any code change that is done perhaps a week later. If we look at another group, the support group, again, the success of your company is based on recurring revenue, which means you have to have happy customers all the time, which means they interact a lot with you all the time, and you have to know how your customer is doing. Remember that up to now, when you shipped out your software, it was handled by IT. They installed it, they managed it. If there were any problems, the end user would usually contact the IT of their company. Today, the IT of the company is totally is out of the picture. They will contact you, and you will find out that your customer support, which has to switch into a 24 service mode and not a 9 to 5 days a week, they suddenly have to deal with a lot of issues that they haven't dealt with before. And they have to develop problem resolution skills. They know about the internet, they know about your infrastructure, and so on. And so you will have to expect a higher skills and higher pay for your support team. Finally, we look at the sales team. They will be affected quite dramatically. There are a lot of issues here, which main ones are the fact that they move into much shorter sales cycles. The sales cycle, because of that, a lot of them will move into cyber sales. There's no more flying across the globe, whining and dining your customers. And then you have to keep up the compensation is a lot different now. You have to make sure not only that you sell the software, but the customer is using it and the customer is happy, and you can't just shoot and forget. And a lot of salespeople don't like this shift in their focus. So there's a lot more to talk about each one of these, but we, for lack of time, will move ahead, and keep in mind that about the difficulties. Success is not guaranteed. The more successful you are as an ISV today, the more difficult it will be for you to move to the new paradigm. In many ways, it's changing the DNA of the company, switching from a product to a service. If you look at SAP, they've already tried 3 times. They've put I don't know how many millions of dollars into this, and they weren't successful 3 times. Chapeau to them, they're still trying. You should expect a pushback. People don't like change in general. Sales will be a problem. A lot of companies are afraid that if they start offering software as a service, it will cannibalize their existing sales. So keep in mind, a lot of companies, a lot of good companies have tried to move to SaaS, and a lot of companies have failed, not because it's not a good idea, it's because they weren't ready and they weren't prepared. Because if they thought it was a delivery issue, they thought it was a technological issue, whereas it was mainly an organizational issue. Speaking of which, so how do we succeed? What is the secret ingredient to make it work? The most important part that I talked to, and I will be emphasizing that, is vision and leadership. Remember, it's not a matter of technology. There's a lot of technology involved, and you have to resolve that. But resolving the technology is not what's going to bring you a successful transition. You have to have vision. You have to understand why you want to transition to SaaS. Ask yourself the right questions. Don't do it because it's fashionable. Don't just do it because your competition is doing it. You have to understand why and read your customer's need. Leadership is extremely important. You have to make sure you have a buy-in of everybody in the company, starting from your C-level and V-level, all the way down to your last employee in the company, because if somebody wants to stop the process, they can at a very low level. Make sure you get in sales at a very early stage. Make sure that everybody understands this is a company goal, and don't have just somebody trying this out in some dark corner of the company, because it's almost surely will fail if you don't have the buy-in from all the way top down. And finally, a plan. Keep in mind, you can. Most companies will go through a hybrid phase. You don't switch automatically from one to the other. You may think of offering a subsystem as a proof of concept. Some companies go out and buy another SaaS company that offers a complementary service just to get their foot in the door. Perhaps you will offer some subsystem or valuable service that complements your product. Again, just to get your foot in the door. But remember, when you move in, you have to phase out your customers. You do not support your old product. When customers want to upgrade, you tell them the only way to upgrade is to move to our on-demand offering. You do not let them upgrade to the old software. Finally, there's a lot of really good solutions out there on the cloud, a rich ecosystem. Use what's out there. Don't go and invent everything from scratch. We're not where we was 10 years ago. There's a lot of shortcuts out there and good solutions. And get help. Work with partners, not with vendors. It's a long process. You don't want point solutions. You want partners that can take your hand and lead you through this along the way. So companies such as Aspire System, for example, it's a good example, but they are, you don't want like I said, a point solution, but true partners. If we had more time, I could share with you some stories of some of the companies that made it and were very successful. But as we're running out of time, I will turn this over to Janaki. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dani. Before Janaki takes over, I just wanted to mention to the audience that if you have any questions, please do type it in the chat window, and we'll be able to take the questions towards the end of the session. So please feel free to type in your questions, and we'll make sure that we respond to them and give you responses either at the end of the session, or if we run out of time, we will send you the answers by email. Now over to Janaki.
Thank you, Kanchana. So in this part of the section of the webinar, we'll focus more on the technical aspects of how to move into the SaaS model, and we'll start with understanding a cloud a bit detail. Dani also covered a bit of it. We will try to see it from a technical perspective, and some of the feasibility assessment that one should be checking before moving into a SaaS model, some of the architecture related aspects and the strategies that one could adopt, and finally we'll close with the SaaS considerations that one should be taking care of. So looking at the typical solution stack, which is similar to what Dani had shown in the previous section, the idea is to understand how the new cloud solution itself is addressing some of the traditional ways of working. So the IaaS portion, the infrastructure service, is something that was earlier being available as a hardware part in a solution stack, is now replaced by IaaS. And if you look at what it has helped from a need perspective, earlier we required network architects, security aspects to be taken care, hosting solutions to be taken care, which is now completely addressed by the IaaS solution. Likewise, PaaS replaces what earlier used to be the framework of any solution or any product. The framework basically provides the plumbing functionality, the base components, which is used to build any application on top of it. So the need, if you look at, was more of software architects who could design scalable systems and a tested and proven architecture. So that is now provided by a PaaS technology. And finally is your SaaS application itself, which is built, which could be built on top of a PaaS or it could be built from scratch. We will look into those details shortly. So before even getting into the finer details of SaaS, a quick check on the feasibility on how much benefit it's going to bring in. Like Dani mentioned, one should be very clear in terms of the reasons behind moving to a SaaS model and what they can gain and what they will not gain by moving into the SaaS model. So these are some of the parameters one will have to think about and see how it is going to benefit, or in other words, how much of a benefit is one going to get by moving into a SaaS model. For example, if you take the number of source code versions one used to maintain, if it is in the range of say 0 to 3 source code versions, you will still be gaining by moving to a SaaS model, assuming that you are going to use a single code base and offer the same solution to all your customers. You are still going to be gaining by moving to a SaaS model. But then the more number of source code versions you are going to have, say for example greater than 10, then it means that you are going to be extremely benefiting by moving to a SaaS model. It's going to save a lot of time and cost by moving to a SaaS model, because maintaining so many versions of code is a maintenance nightmare. The amount of effort that goes in is extremely high. So a similar kind of a thing is number of releases in a year. The lesser the number of releases, it's not going to be too much of a gain. It is still going to be benefiting from a SaaS model, but it will relatively be low. Whereas in the SaaS model, what it allows you to do, because it's on demand and it's central, you can do a lot of upgrades as and when you feel is required. So the number of releases, if you are planning for more number of releases, then obviously the SaaS model brings in you a lot of benefits in hand. So this is just to give you an idea of what kind of a feasibility check you want to do, the various parameters that could really help. So moving forward, once assume that you have done a feasibility assessment and you found it to be good moving forward, some of the key architecture challenges that you should be prepared to handle, prepared to solve in a SaaS model. The first thing is, for example, is the scalability. particularly with the solution of a SaaS, where a same code or same solution is being offered to more than one customer, which usually is not the case in a traditional model, where you are going to install the solution for one customer within their premises. Whereas in comparison to a SaaS model, the same solution from a central location is served to more than one customer. And what that means is a lot more users, a lot more customers are going to access the same solution, and hence it calls for a pretty scalable solution. And the same applies on the performance factor as well, because the number of users are going to be high, because a lot of consumers, a lot of organizations are going to access the same solution. You need to be ensuring the performance of the system is taken care for concurrent users, and likewise the bandwidth kind of constraints has to be planned for. And few other aspects, for example, availability. In a SaaS world, everything is driven by SLAs. So you will be signing for an SLA in terms of the availability of the solution. So you need to be ensuring that it is taken care of. And some of the new techniques that are allowing the availability to be taken care of in other aspects are availability of offline mode of working, where your entire solution could be running in an offline mode in the client environment. And once they are back to the internet, or when they are back to the connection, they'll be able to sync up and be continuing working with the main application. So those are some of the new technologies that are coming up to address these solutions. And a few other things that one should be taking care of is the integration part. One of the challenges is the solution might have to talk to 10 different other systems within the on-premise. So those aspects have to be planned for. Multi-tenancy itself is a bigger challenge, it's a bigger decision to be made. We'll get into that shortly. But just to give a high-level overview, these are some of the key architecture challenges one should be planning for in their SaaS solution. So we talked about the multi-tenancy in the previous slide. So this is again to give you an idea of what multi-tenancy is from an end-user point of view. Broadly speaking, there are like two types of solutions you can develop. One is a single tenant, and the other one is a multi-tenant. So the pictures 1 and 2 here, which is the top portion of the slide, represent variants of single tenant. Likewise, 3 and 4 are variants of multi-tenant. So what it essentially means is that the solution that you are planning to provide, what in technical terms called as the instance, remains different or same, and it's applicable for each tenant. That's what you see in 1 and 2. So each tenant, in this case it used to be the end user or the end organization, has its own instance, and it could either be in the model of 1 or 2, where the instance itself could vary. In model number 1, each tenant has their own instance, which could completely vary from one person to another, whereas in 2 it's the same instance. But nevertheless, each tenant has their own instance, compared to 3 and 4, which is where the instance is developed or architected in a way that it can recognize and serve different tenants, but still using the same source code. So that's what we call a multi-tenant enabled application. So as you can see, the benefits of having this multi-tenants is numerous, because it saves you a lot of time and effort from a maintenance perspective. But however, how do I decide this maturity model? This is called the SaaS maturity model as level 1, 2, 3, and 4. So some of the key factors you may want to consider is the business volume that you are planning to generate out of your SaaS solution, the cost or the budget you have in hand, and the time you have in hand, and the product size that you are planning to move. To get into finer details of it, some of the factors and how they will be impacted or how they will be transforming for each of the levels. For example, if we look at the time factor itself, from a level 1 perspective, the time taken is going to be very low. You can in fact move pretty quickly into a level 1 kind of a solution, because all it requires is to move that particular solution and create an instance and have it available for the tenant. But likewise, compared to a level 4, where you will have to go through some kind of a re-architecturing, you need to do some design changes. So the time taken is going to be high in case of level 3 and 4. Similarly, the cost factor is proportionate here, where the level 1 is going to take less of a cost purely from a transition perspective compared to a level 4. But there are other aspects like maintenance efforts. For example, it's going to be extremely high for a level 1 because you are going to maintain multiple instances. So even if you are going to apply a small patch or a small upgrade, you need to be doing it n number of times depending on the instances that you are having. And hence the maintenance is going to be extremely high compared to a level 4, whereas you can see you have one instance serving multiple customers, and hence managing that one instance is much easier compared to managing multiple instances. And the same applies for the scalability part of it. Level 1 is just does not allow you to scale. You need to keep getting new machines. You need to keep expanding your hardware infrastructure. Whereas a level 4 is much more scalable in that sense, where you can add just few more machines and be able to have a load balancing environment to serve large numbers of customers. Engineering skill set, for example, you don't need a lot of software engineering skill set because it's primarily to do with the infrastructure virtualization kind of a concept where you can have those instances rolled out for each customer. And likewise, the operational efficiency, if you look at, is pretty low in a level 1 compared to a level 4. Now, so this is again to give you a perspective of where do I want to stand, or what kind of an approach I want to take purely from transitioning to the right maturity model. So one should be paying enough attention on all these aspects and decide purely from a short-term as well as a long-term solution what would be the right model to start with or to move to. So just to get into further details of what kind of a technical strategy one can take, or the technical roadmap one can take towards moving to a SaaS model. So let's take each one of these things and then look into the details of it. So let me take the leftmost one, self-hosting to start with. The smaller boxes, what you see beneath the self-hosting, are the typical stacks that one would have in building their solution. So you have your infrastructure, which is your hardware, which is going to contain an OS within it. And then you have your framework, like we saw, the framework that helps you build your SaaS application. And finally is the browser through which your client is going to be accessing the application. So in a self-hosting environment, what we are talking here is a completely stack built by the end user, completely built by the ISV here, where they take care of all of these boxes, each of these boxes, and they provide the solution to the end user. So let's look at how it transforms when we start applying each of the tracks or each of the solutions that are available in today's market. So let's take an IaaS, for example. The same stacks still hold good, but when you move for an IaaS solution, for example, like an Amazon or a Rackspace, what it offers to you is the infrastructure portion alone. So that box is now taken care by your IaaS provider. So in this case, if you are going to Amazon, then the complete hardware of it is taken care by them. So which means that you did not bother about that particular box anymore. Whereas you still have to be taking care of your framework, you still have to take care of the OS patches that you want to maintain, you still have to develop your own SaaS application and host it in the IaaS model. Likewise, if you move to a PaaS solution, a PaaS stands for a platform as a service, and there are two variants within PaaS, and what we call the iPaaS and the aPaaS. iPaaS stands for infrastructure PaaS, and as the name suggests, it provides you the infrastructure related platform, whereas aPaaS stands for an application platform. So in case of an iPaaS, if you look at, it provides you the cloud infrastructure as well as it provides you the platform. So which means that you will be able to make use of both the boxes, the OS related aspects, for example, the complete operating system, the databases that you need to take care. For example, in Azure, everything is taken care by the Azure platform. So which means that you will have to focus only on the pieces of framework, SaaS application, that's it. Whereas the rest of it is taken care by your iPaaS provider. And another alternative here could be an aPaaS, which stands for application PaaS. And as you could guess, it starts taking up more ownership, which means that there is less for you to focus on. And in case of an aPaaS, like for example Longjump or Force.com, it takes care of the cloud infrastructure, which means you don't have to worry about the hardware part. The platform is provided to you, and also the framework is readily available to you, and all you need to do is just focus on building your business functionality of the SaaS application. So those are some of the benefits you will be getting in each of those variants. And finally, there is another option, what we call the solution accelerator, and what it refers to is another variant of a solution where the framework piece alone could be taken from an external vendor, for example like a Propel or a Lice, where the framework is available to you and the other options are still flexible to you. So for example, you don't want to spend time building the framework, but you want the flexibility of putting it in whichever platform you want it to, whichever hardware you want it to, then the last option becomes an attractive one. So these are the different major tracks or major approaches strategically one can take towards transitioning to a SaaS model. And purely looking at the multi-tenancy support, in case of self-hosting, in this case assuming it to be more of individually installing these instances of the software to each customer, there is not going to be multi-tenancy. Likewise in the IaaS, again you get only the hardware portion, so it doesn't by default come with the multi-tenancy support. In fact, if you are going to develop from scratch the entire solution with multi-tenancy, then that's a different story. But by default, these two options do not carry a multi-tenancy support. Compared to the other three options of iPaaS, APaaS or SA, by default they bring in the multi-tenancy support, and hence that becomes another factor that one should be considering towards moving to SaaS. Again, just to give a look at the overall strategy of the SaaS versus PaaS and what difference it causes. The SaaS is purely a concept, whereas the PaaS is a technology by itself. And more importantly, in a SaaS model, if you go by developing the solution or moving through any of the other IaaS kind of a solution, you have the option of reusing the software that you are currently having. Whereas in a PaaS kind of a scenario, most likely you will have to rewrite the software because you are going to build it on top of the platform provided by the vendor. So that's another aspect one should be watching out for. And support for hybrid model, in case if you are planning to support both on-demand and on-premise, which some of the companies do, in that case PaaS again becomes an expensive route because you have to almost have two variants of your solution itself, and both has to be invested and managed. And finally, the vendor lock-in one should be aware of. In a PaaS, you get locked in some senses because you rely on the PaaS vendor to be available throughout as long as your business exists and be able to continuously provide or rely on that particular vendor. And some of the other considerations that you may want to think about is, as we saw, the level 1 and 2 is purely from a customer point of view, where the customer is going to be gaining more benefit because you are going to give more configurability options, you are going to give either customization or the configurability options. Whereas 3 and 4 are mostly for the ISVs itself, where you are going to improve your efficiency, you are going to improve your overall maintenance and scalable efficiency. So that's something that one should be very clear about, in not just blindly jumping into level 4 doesn't help. You need to be clear about who's going to serve the advantage of. And also looking at virtualization as an alternate for multi-tenancy, in the sense of it could be a stepping stone, so you don't have to really get into the multi-tenancy in the first shot. Virtualization is a stepping stone in some senses, but you need to be again weighing the benefits that you're going to get before making the decision. And also looking at the pre-built SaaS frameworks like Propel, solution accelerators is something that one should be taking care of. And as we discussed, picking the right maturity model is the key. And on the PaaS front, it definitely has a few good scenarios to try out the PaaS. For example, if you want to just focus on the functionality and not engineering aspects of it, maybe sometimes the ISVs do not have a team which can actually work on, a technical team to work on this. In those kind of scenario, PaaS solution becomes attractive. And also if you are having a legacy technology, then anyway it's time to rewrite. So you can as well think of PaaS as a solution. And more importantly, PaaS comes with the solution of both the SaaS plus IaaS, which means that you don't have to look at a separate hosting option. the PaaS vendor also has the hosting option, so it becomes like a one-stop solution for you. Some of the considerations if you are moving to a PaaS solution, as we discussed, the vendor lock-in aspect of it, technical skill set that you have in place to build the solution, and the ROI aspect as well. So how long are you going to sustain in a PaaS model? Are you going to experiment your new product or your existing product? If so, how long are you going to experiment? Is it making sense to, from an ROI perspective, to continue on a PaaS, or should I build it within my own solution? And likewise, there are certain PaaS, like for example, Force.com itself offers you a lot of vertical related assets. For example, CRM related modules, CRM related functionalities are readily available within Force.com. So if your solution is related to that, then it becomes easier to leverage on top of those available modules. And there are also platforms like, for example, SaaS, which do not mandate a complete rewrite, which is a totally different option than what we saw in the earlier slide. So if you have an existing product and you don't want to rewrite, then SaaS kind of becomes another option altogether, where you can transform your existing thing and then have them available through the SaaS hosting options. And as we get into the SaaS model, it also brings in a set of administration challenges, which usually is not existing in a traditional model. For example, the tenant management part of it, you need to be able to add, remove, and change tenant configurations. And remember, this is all going to happen as a service base, so you should be prepared to handle these requests in a much more effective manner, because the number of requests are also going to be high. So you need to plan for it, and ideally it's better to have these kind of features available within the SaaS product. That way it becomes easier to manage. And for example, like metering and billing is also good examples where you may want to meter the usage of the application, and depending on your licensing model, depending on the payment plan that you have put across, you may want to know how much a particular tenant has consumed or utilized your software, and accordingly meter and also publish a bill along with that. So all of this becomes more of an administration challenges, not exactly challenges, but more of aspects that you need to take care while you are doing the planning of it. And finally, the hosting related challenge. Whatever the solution that you go for, whether it's an IaaS or a PaaS, you need to ensure that the SLAs are taken care of, availability more importantly, but with the increasing number of solutions coming up and the maturity of the ecosystem itself, the availability is getting a lot better compared to any specific personalized solution. But also aspects in terms of physical and network security, depending on the type of product you are planning to move to a SaaS model. For example, if it's going to contain more and more critical information, banking related products, then you may want to spruce up the physical and network security, or in fact go for a higher level of such security in your hosting solution. And likewise, planning for your internet bandwidth, redundancy of lines, and again, most of these are not taken care by the IaaS provider, but you need to be sure about what is that your product will require, and accordingly choose and pick what you want as to a configuration. And finally, the storage capacity, what you want to handle, the hardware scalability. With the SaaS model, again, you need to be ready to scale up and down at any point in time, and hence you need to ensure that you get those aspects worked out from your solution, hardware solution provider, and also facilitate the ease of upgrades. So that's all I have in this part of the section of our webinar. So I'll hand it over back to Kanchana.
Thank you, Janaki. Actually, we have very few minutes. I mean, we have run out of time, but I have a couple of questions, so I thought I'll go ahead and put across to the speakers. First question is for Janaki. How does SaaS handle the need to restore to backups at customer end?
Okay. So this particular question from a technical standpoint can be addressed in the way how you are going to architect your solution. And there are different ways you can architect your multi-tenant solutions. There are two broad ways. One is through a shared schema where the same the same data or all of the customers' data are stored within the same DB or the schema, and there is another model where you can have independent DBs or independent schemas where the information are scattered around. So to address this particular requirement, it is always better to, in case if you need more control on the customer level information on that data, it's always recommended to have it as a separate independent schema. That way you can in fact have different machines altogether, different machines to have the DBs of the respective customers, and that way it becomes easy to operate on the customer's data. And to make it available in terms of the customer sending it back to the customer, you can always have utilities developed which could be available at the customer end, through which you can transform back and forth these backup data.
Okay, thanks, Janaki. One for Dani. How does one avoid cannibalization of existing product when the product is moved to SaaS, when their product is moved to SaaS? Dani?
Yeah, thank you, Kanchana. I will repeat this because I think it was swallowed. The question was, how does one avoid cannibalization of one's own product when moving to SaaS?
Correct.
This is a question that keeps coming up again and again, with customers saying, if I'm going to offer my software as a service, then my existing customers, I will lose my base. You have to keep in mind, if one of your customers is ready to move to the SaaS model, then they're ready to move to the SaaS model. So if you won't offer it, someone else will offer it. And if you don't think that somebody else is already now offering your solution as a service, so either you haven't looked around or they will announce it next week. So you keep in mind that you'd rather be the one cannibalizing your own customer base than having another company coming in and stealing those customers from you. So there's no way around it. SaaS is probably the way of the future, and you must be there and offer it before your competition does, and do a better job at it.
Okay, thank you, Dani. So we have come to the end of the webinar today. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your participation. We had a lot of good attendance and good participation today. I hope you really found the webinar useful. If you have any questions, further questions, please do write to us. You can either write to info@aspiresys.com, or you can write to Dani@kalia.biz, or to Janaki.jayachandran@aspiresys.com. We appreciate your participation, and please do get in touch with us if you need, if you have any questions and if you need any help. We also have a small feedback form, short feedback form, which you can fill after the webinar ends, so that we get to do better and add more value to you as we go forward. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Dani.
Thank you, Kanchana.
Thanks, Janaki.
Thank you, Kanchana.